Hello and welcome to Sean's Thoughts. You're here with me in my home in front of this beautiful wall that I once painted and sitting below a painting that I did as well as my former partner did. And you're here with me today on this very special episode of Sean's Thoughts, which you can see I'm here with you and a little bit of my art that we see up here on the left hand side. Not necessarily my art, but the artistic expression of everything that I do always reflects, the ever evolving experience that I'm sharing with you today. And with you today, I essentially believe, truly understood how I could use Rumble Studio to truly explore my creativity and my connection with everyone. I've always wanted to do podcasts where I could sometimes share, whether it was my art or my videos themselves, or even just, things that I had learned. Because sometimes when we show pictures, it truly does help people envision more of what I see rather than just my words, especially when sometimes, honestly, my words are flowing quite rapidly, sometimes even faster than I'm able to even understand, or sometimes even, where did that come from? Anyways, thank you so much for joining this special edition of Sean's Thoughts, titled, or at least it may be titled when I finish it, When Life Removes What No Longer Fits. And, this is a fitting title, although I'm not fully aware of everything that I'm going to say, because a lot of times when I have an idea of something to talk about, it does come up as more than perhaps, and sometimes completely different than I ever imagined it could be. And that's truly how I foresee the world, at least my experience of it moving forward, is living in a world where unexpected wonders and delights are upon every moment that I move forward. And I truly do believe, as I've mentioned in the past, that that's perhaps the way that life was supposed to be at one time. And regardless of other people telling me how they think that limit life should be limited, or they're happy with the lives that they're living, and they're accepting what's been given to them and they're content with that. To be honest, I've always lived a life where I recognized there was so much possibility in the world. And at times I would chase that possibility, not chasing it as if, running for something more, a greener pasture over the other side of the mountain, yet having that feeling, that desire, that intuitive belief that there was something amazing for me to experience just over yonder. And that if I took that opportunity and followed that inner guidance, I would find it. And so that's kind of how I wanted to create this particular podcast today. While I talk, I essentially set up a slideshow that allows me to showcase some of the amazing places that I visited today, and share them with you. So we're just setting it all up. So yeah, so today, while I talk, I'm going to allow this particular slideshow, once I get it all properly set up. Oh, no, there's the right button. Perfect. So I'm really just kind of still learning, and it's completely acceptable for me anyways, just to go with the flow and allow what comes up on the screen to come up on the screen. I spent the time this morning talking to some llamas that you saw recently, and then I took a stroll through this amazing environment and had a long talk with my sister, as well as took some amazingly beautiful photos of reflections and deadwood, as you see here, and other things. So I'm just going to let all that play while I talk. It gives us something to look at perhaps, and to explore perhaps how things could be viewed differently from a different aspect. And this particular slideshow is automated, so I've just chosen the photos that I had taken today, and I'm sharing them with you now. So welcome again, as I said, and I thank you so much for sharing your attention with me. Our attention, as I said, is of the utmost importance. And yeah, so enjoy this beauty, and let's get on with what I wanted to talk about. See, I've went through a lot of different experiences over the last 3 years. Actually, it all started off with, one day walking out into a normal day, unhappy. Life wasn't necessarily going the way that I would prefer it had. And for a long time, I had felt that way. And essentially, one day I came to a point where, like a turtle spinning on its shell, I was flipped over and spun around several times, finding that my former partner no longer wanted to be partners, and being in a situation where we both owned a store, which was my sole source of income. I was suddenly put into an environment that, it was a completely destabilizing adventure. At that time, I didn't necessarily see it as an adventure. I saw it as, like, where's my world going? Yet over the previous weeks to that, I was always questioning why I was staying in a situation where I felt, not happy. That's the kind of the way I'll put on to it. Of course, there was other ideas and thoughts going through my mind, but yet I didn't feel as if my soul, my heart, my ideas was being fully fulfilled. See, I've always been a person of love, a person of adventure. I loved exploring. I loved going many new places, backpacking, adventures. The show that I watch with my son called Pokemon, it truly does depict a environment and a expression of life that I would love to experience. Always moving forward, always seeing something new, meeting new people, becoming stronger, going through adventures, taking those trials and challenges that Ash Ketchum on Pokemon faces every day, and continually becoming a stronger, more fulfilled version of himself. In fact, he helps his fellow Pokemon, he helps them evolve into better, stronger versions that literally change in front of him. Actually, I watched an episode today with my son in which a small, cute cat named Litten went through a very strong battle where he was able to evolve into his higher form of Torcat. And he did it alongside, or perhaps in opposition to, another version of his evolution named, suddenly I forgot what his name, Incineroar. Anyways, this is, of course, a fictional, or not, yeah, fictional narrative, but it shows how people, when they're pitted against trials and challenges and oppositions, that they themselves can get considerably stronger. And so I've come to the understanding that when we live in life, that, part of the growing process is to move beyond the known, which we have all held or even covenanted and sometimes defended with our very life, because we felt secure, because we felt that what we once had in the past was something that we would always have in the future. And that's essentially what my programming was. You see, as I was backpacking across China, I met my former partner and I fell in love, and I felt because, the programming of my civilization, my society had told me that, for now we would go and live happily ever after. And yet from that experience, I started to recognize falling back in patterns which weren't even mine. See, I believed that true unity is coming when people share one another's experiences and work towards supporting each other's dreams. And yet, over time, I found myself getting captured in someone else's dream, someone else's idea of what life should be. Rather than prior, before meeting her, I was on an exploration to meet, yes, lots of women, but also lots of people. It didn't matter whether they were women, it didn't matter whether they were lovers, it didn't matter who they were. I wanted to go out and experience the world. And so I ventured to Guatemala to sleep outside the temples in Tikal. I went to the, Hawaii, and I walked on new land that was newly formed via a volcano underneath my feet, which was, by the way, still active. I did all these things, and that's kind of how I wanted to live life. But yet, as with all parts of life, when we get to certain parts, like the birth of my son, I started to adapt because I had also wanted to be a parent, and I wanted to be the absolute best parent that I could possibly be. So much so that in 2021, when they decided to make little children wear masks, I had my son removed from school and I adapted my life to do homeschooling. I put everything on hold, and yet I still did my absolute best. in order to manage my company that I had created called Seamless Alterations with my former partner. And so I did what I needed to do and adapted as I needed to adapt in order to live the life that I was living and take responsibility for those parts of my life that, regardless if I had fully chosen them or not, they were my responsibility, and holding myself accountable. That's essentially the decisions that I made. And regardless of the struggles, regardless of the, endless, countless nights where I was unhappy, I still pushed forward, finding happiness in the points that I could find and could be happy. But yet, the thing about evolution is that eventually we move to a place where we are no longer in alignment with that. And so that's kind of where this episode is coming up today, because actually, over the course of the last several months, actually since last March, I felt that I wanted to continue on my journey, of course, with my son and, with those relationships that I do value, such as my sister and even my cousin. Yet, everyone's path is different. So whether or not that happens, whether or not I'm meant to connect and meet up with people that I have met in different communities, such as the United News Network community or not, I trust in all of the guidance I receive. Like, for example, today, the images you're looking at are of a pair of llamas right now. And I actually had the grace and the beauty to sit and watch these creatures eat today. And I actually recorded a video of them for one of my future episodes, perhaps, of my Do No Thing, where I literally sat in front of a whole bunch of animals and did no thing. And then I took a journey through what is a dog park. These images that you're looking at right now, they come from a dog park where the dogs are permitted to run free within this area because it's all enclosed by the water you see. And I didn't even imagine myself going to this miraculously beautiful place today. I had actually dropped my son off at school, and I believed I was going back to Golden Ears Provincial Park when suddenly the car was driving towards this place, and I recognized that I had actually intended to do my podcast yesterday, actually sitting by this scene right as we just looked right now. I was holding this book that I wanted to read from yesterday, and I was going to sit here and record a podcast. But yet, when I got there with the dog, his name is Pepper, he ran off and he swam across this waters, and he was having fun and, really enjoying himself, meeting dogs on the other side of the river. And of course, that caused me to panic somehow and feel uncomfortable, because when I get into this flow state where I just simply talk, it really does behoove me, I think is the proper word, just to let my thoughts stream out. And so I packed up my stuff and allowed my dog to run and play. And I didn't worry about doing the podcast, but I found myself returning to this amazing area today. And the reflection of the still water, absolutely fantastic. Like, I'm so excited right now to see these pictures and share them with whomever is watching. And that's really an important part, whomever's watching. Because as I know for sure, there are people watching from all different aspects and perspectives. People who perhaps wish me the best, and, perhaps even people that I want to and they want to meet one day and have some adventures ourselves. And then there's also people in my life, perhaps even people watching this podcast, who are part of that aspect of my former life that no longer fit and align with who I am. And perhaps those are the energies and the reasons why what I'm about to talk about is, part of this whole experience. See, I've often talked about, I have a Patreon channel. I made all that set up so that I could receive income from that. It did take me a long time to, allow myself to actually connect with Patreon. In fact, my Patreon channel, I had it for quite a long time before I even had anything really about me. It was more so, me just putting up that I made a video post. Soon after, though, about 6-7 months ago, I started actually putting more content. I started telling stories. I started, sharing my photography. I started sharing parts of me other than just the videos I was creating with the words I was creating. And I started sharing overall my words and my thoughts, not just using it as a way to share what I'd already created on YouTube. I wanted to actually share other aspects. And even with that, recently, about a month ago, I launched a offering, actually two of them on Patreon, where I was able to showcase and essentially offer a complete script of a first episode of a TV show that I had personally written along with my partner, writing partner, Jim, as well as a creation that I co-created with God called Still Karen, Still Sharon. And it's essentially catching up with the Care Bears 30 years later from when I originally started watching them. And it's an amazing exploration into the possibilities of, how other beings of love, all with their own unique personalities. Like, the interesting thing, if you don't know about the Care Bears, is they weren't just, one group of bears who all believed the same thing. They were bears of different personalities, different upbringings, different aspects and traits within who they were, from grumpy to bright to shiny to care heart to sharing to a whole bunch of other cheerful bear and lucky bear and so many different bears. And these ideas of the individual presence and individual points of view, perspectives perhaps, of the bears allowed me as a child to see that, it's important, I think, that in a community there are other aspects of our existence so that we can care and share through, sharing our perspectives, sharing our differences and valuing them. And that's what this video that I created and allowed as an offering for my community. And this particular sharing is open to all of my community members who are contributing. And it allows them to download it for free as an MP4 file, which can be saved on any type of, iPad or iPhone or whatever it is, however it is that you choose to carry it forth. You can even put it on a little thumb drive and plug it into your TV if you have one of those smart TVs and watch it and share with it. And so I realized that Patreon was far more than just, a place like a social media platform to share what I had already created. It was a space that I could build a community. And essentially, I grew into that understanding. And for the last month or so, I've been truly, not pushing it, but being bold enough to claim it as a community which I would love to create and share with. And so, with that being said, I had two fabulous people, and actually a few fabulous people in addition to that, but I had a small group of people who have truly seen and, come to support me on there. And for such a long time, I've always hoped, I've always had, the ideas and dreams of, doing the things that I talk about, such as my blueprints playlist. And yet through all of this, trial, I'll call it, things didn't happen the way that I would have preferred them to happen. But yet that's something I've always come to understand as a major lesson. And I'll share that lesson with you today. See, we all have things that we want to happen. And a lot of times I've come to an understanding that those wants that we have aren't necessarily derived from, a wanting of the now. That sometimes the feelings or the thoughts that we have, they come from outside of us. And whether that's from a future version of ourselves or from someone else completely, we sometimes are able as Homo sapiens to pick up on energies, thoughts, ideas, and beliefs that perhaps are not ours. But yet part of my healing journey was to understand that a lot of times the things, the energies, the thoughts, the ideas that came to me sometimes weren't mine. And, they may even could have been, and I say this in a general format so I'm not projecting on anyone, but they could have also be images or reflections of future events, because the way that we see time is not as we would view it based on my understanding of a lot of different aspects of our reality that we live in. And so things that perhaps that I want are things that maybe I've experienced not yet, meaning that they are maybe experiences, and I say maybe, experiences that are to come. And so I've allowed that to essentially come into the being that I am, and recognizing that part of that maybe is, some aspect or some version or some ability of me being able to see into what could be, and therefore working towards that. Yet a lot of times we sit in this power of, I want this and I want that and I want to manifest this and this is what I want. Well, first of all, the word want means that we are in lack of, and what we are in lack of, we generally get a lot more of. And so I came to understand and be more open and allowing to what does happen as being the best possible solution or God's divine plan for what is happening. And so, with that being said, for such a long time, I opened up these avenues for Patreon to essentially allow that abundance in. I refused to take that red pill that you see in the Matrix, go back into the Matrix. I didn't want to go back into the Matrix, but at yet time I wanted to move myself forward. So with every essentially podcast I've done it in a point where I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to evolve. And as with today's podcast, showing these lovely images of my morning, I was here just a few hours ago, and this is the beauty that I was witnessing. And yeah, this is definitely an example of that evolution. And yet, during this last few months, I kept asking myself, like, why is Patreon not allowing, or why is the universe, why is God, why is, are there people out there that are purposely trying to stop me from, sharing what I have to share? Actually, last night I did a podcast and I talked about the future of elections and voting. And it was a potential future, as I mentioned in the title, because it's an exploration of what could be rather than what has to be. Because maybe we don't even need voting. So, I leave myself open for that. But getting into a discussion of what the possibilities could be, I think are, freeing. And they allow what could be to be. And so, with all that being said, up until now, I've had very little interest in my Patreon channel, which has led me to a point where, I've been unable to pay the rent for the place that I live in. And although the building manager and the people that, collect the money for the rent, they have been so graceful and so gracious and allowing me to stay here for the last, I guess, almost a month and a half without paying rent, I finally received an eviction letter telling me that I have to essentially vacate my house. And I've been here for 14 years. And while the rent isn't all that expensive, I've been in a situation where I moved in here before rents got all crazy. And in Canada, there's a limitation to how much they can raise the rent by. And so I was essentially saved from all of these crazy rents out there. But yet, even with that, even with the graces that I have received, my own ambitions or my own essentially efforts to create my own income stream have been thwarted perhaps by myself, maybe a self-sabotage, maybe lack of ambition. Like, people have their own ideas. Actually, I keep getting told to go on welfare. I keep getting told to run to the government and, get them to give me some money. But yet I see the art and the channel and the photography. And even as I'm looking up behind my TV, there is a beautiful piece of art that I painted on the wall that, when I do move from here, it's gone because I painted it on the wall. And I do have videos of that, and perhaps I'll show that in the future coming forward. But yet, yeah, it's come to the end of the journey that I have had within this place. And I've spent so much of my love, my attention, my energy, countless hours of, isolated versus self-reflection, which I believe is truly one of the most important parts of self-evolution and the healing journey, is to spend time in isolation. Not necessarily isolation off in the mountains, surrounded by trees, talking to, soccer balls, not that type of isolation. Although, for some people, that journey is definitely advantageous for them. But yet I lived in an isolation where I was in the center of a city, and I would often try to share all of the information that I did have, that I did receive. And I say receive because information flows to me, in through me, and of course through me, meaning that I would share it with who I was guided to share it with. And yet, through all of these experiences, finding support was very limited. But yet, I understand that we create a lot of our own reality. And so there has been times where I have felt that projection upon me. And I've seen those videos come into my stream, creating this idea of conspiracy beyond what normal ideas could be. And so I've definitely seen where I've held and limited myself, but yet I also recognize that all of this was part of my experience to heal, my experience to understand the nature of reality and move past it and beyond it, actually, to a point where I could see myself living in a world that is absolutely different than the one that you look out the window and you see. And the world that I look out when I look out my window, like I live in a city called Maple Ridge. And in this city, we're not necessarily a city like you would look at, some of the bigger cities like Vancouver, Toronto, LA, and nothing like that. I would say this is a supersized town, and they actually only recently became a city. They were incorporated as a city. So we have grown quite large in a small amount of time with a lot of housing projects, yet there is so much infrastructure which is, lacking. Nonetheless, I've looked out my window and I've seen a large amount of, we'll call them homeless Homo sapiens, who have decided to, move from wherever it is they were, and they're all at different aspects of their life. Actually, I had the grace to meet this lovely woman the other night, and I was sitting outside at 11 o'clock at night, and she came walking down the street because she was looking for a specific building where she was planning on spending the night. And I had a really interesting conversation with her. And I've had lots of interesting conversations with other people. Sometimes the idea of homeless isn't not having a home. Homeless is simply living within, nature, living within the world at large and being able to adapt. Actually, my cousin, she has lived that type of life for a very long time. And although sometimes people experience, different reasons of how they got there, the idea that we could live in a world where perhaps we weren't guided or confined by rules and regulations that we had no part or partaking in creating. We create our futures often by looking into the past and seeing what was the possibilities of yesterday. And through those possibilities, we limit our potential for what we could create the coming days. And so, with that being said, like I've said, I've got to a point where, there are people who have helped from differing people, I'll just say, in my life, to different, synchronicities that popped up and gave me those or assisted me with the resources that I needed to get to this exact point that I could stand in a camera and share this, unknowing whether or not, who this would reach. Because on my YouTube channel, and perhaps one day I'm going to show you this, there's such crazy anomalies when it comes into the analytics of my channel. Actually, I created this super funny video yesterday, and I'm going to post it at the end of here because this video deserves millions of views because it was my Mother's Day wish for the entire world. And actually, I did a podcast yesterday. I'm going to put that as well because those two videos were my contribution to the love and the compassion and the harmony that I truly do believe our world has the potential to experience, to project, and to receive. And I don't mean project in the same way as the other one, but I mean to broadcast and receive. That's the right word, not project, but to broadcast. And yet, to be honest, the amount that those two videos went, like at one point in time, there was 18 views, and I think I had sent it to 18 people. So, and I had watched the video myself multiple times, breaking up laughing, and every time it's this little funny short where one rock is talking to another rock, and it's very comical. And yes, it is somewhat of an, you can call it a promo, not an advertisement, but a promo for my channel. But at the same time, it was a Mother's Day wish to all of those beautiful feminine energies out there, however represent that. And it was my wish to them to have an amazing day, because well, I truly believe that all days should be for mothers and all days should be for fathers, and that type of idea that we should celebrate each other every day. Yet I understand that we live in a world where perhaps we're so busy that taking that one day to make that person feel ultimately super special, spending the whole day with your mother, for example, that's an awesome potential experience to have. It also, yeah, anyways, it was just amazing. I'm trailing off right now. But my point being is that I created those two videos as messages for the world, but yet their ability to find their audience, at least from what I'm being allowed to perceive, meaning that if there's some sort of like firewall or something that's limiting my experience from going out, whether it's God who didn't want me to get out until I was ready, as I've often heard that being as a reason, or it's someone who's trying to limit it, or it's me limiting myself, perhaps through my own programming, I'm breaking free of that, because I see so many potential adventures out there. And I've lived in this home for my son's entire life. And so this has been where he grew up. It's where he knows. Actually, my cat, who recently passed away, named Xiao Mao, she lived her final entire years here. I've actually lived here for, I guess it's 12 or almost 13, 14-ish years. And my entire time, I had my cat, I had my turtles, I had my son. My cat's passed away. My son is, finished his first 12 years of his life. And, he's starting to grow into that person who's, able to go on adventures. He can climb Kilimanjaro with me. He can climb Mount Fuji with me. He's definitely, a strong individual. Actually, I'm so proud of him because yesterday he went with his mother and he rode a bike for like 30 kilometers. So he's definitely got to that point where he's an adventurous person. But more importantly, we've got to the point where we've outgrown the home we live in. And I've gotten to the point recognizing that perhaps having this, base camp, or having this place that I had to always have each day in routine and each day in security, offering me that confinement, while at the same time that security and that routine, perhaps that isn't in alignment with the reality that I keep talking about that I want for myself. See, oftentimes, as I said, we'll go back to this idea of wants, that there's things in our world that we want. We want that fancy car, for example. We want that yacht. We want that mansion. But perhaps we don't want the bills that come with it. Having a yacht, for example, requires a lot of maintenance. Having a large fancy house requires, hiring people and learning how to manage the housekeepers and the butlers and stuff, learning how to manage the yard workers. Well, if you don't want those roles of managing other people, then perhaps those dreams aren't necessarily in alignment with what you want. If you don't want to have to work your butt off so that you can pay for the maintenance of the boat, well, then maybe you don't really want that boat. You want the experience of perhaps being on that boat. So better refining and defining those wants and wishes, desires that we have sometimes is a really good activity to realize that maybe that's the reason why we're losing what we're losing, because we're moving in a direction to be how we want. See, I envision myself and, those that I would love to connect with moving across this planet in a very different aspect, or a very different vehicle, one that is filled with love, that is filled with adventure, that is filled with, moving from place to place, not being, that normal homeless perception, but being that nomadic adventure. who perhaps has a base camp. So I've even, put into my mind that even if I were to find that $1,800, for example, and pay the guy who I owe it to, that I would still continue to want to seek this summer of 2026 and get out into the world. I would love to do podcasts with other members of the United News Network, the social community group that I've connected with, and see what they're doing and explore their worlds, and bring faces to some of the people that I have been communicating with for the last 3 years. I would love to do that. I would love to get into the world and seek and explore all of these different places that I read about in my books, from the mythical places of Avalon to Greenland to the Arctic to the Antarctic to Egypt to the Middle East to Constantinople to Mesopotamia to Babylon to, so many different places, to go back to the Stonehenge and to meet up with people that resonate and to trust in God that those people that are in alignment with that we will, connect when we need to connect. I was talking to my sister today and I came up with this imagery in my mind. It's as if I'm waiting right now at the train station without a watch, without a telephone, without a clock to tell me when the train's coming, but yet I know the train is coming. I'm there with certain conviction, and regardless of whether or not there's, a homeless person over there, someone screaming over there, someone who wants me to go do this, or a candy machine, or, whatever numerous distractions there are, I'm sitting there content, happy. My bags and my son's bags have been packed essentially since last March in preparation for what I'm going through now. And I'm sitting there waiting for that train. And I'll use the word awaiting, because I've done everything that I've been called to do. And I know the train is coming. And I know that when I get on that train, there's going to be other people that are in resonant frequency. And, we're getting on the train together. It's not my train. It's not their train. It's our train. It's God's train. And we're going to go somewhere and allow that train to take us into a world where, beauty is abundant and experiences are unlimited, and love and connection and community are of the center. And so things like everything that I talk about on my channel is essentially going to become a potential. Now, when that train fully arrives, who knows? I allow the grace of God to arrive when it arrives, but yet I know within my heart that that train is coming, and that every action that I take, regardless of how it's perceived by all of you people that are watching, all of you souls that are watching, SOL, all of you humans that are watching, all of you beings that are beyond, the visual presentation of our world, that it's time. The train's coming. I can hear it off in the distance. I'm all ready. And, the interesting thing about this train is that since life is an experience, even when I get on that train and I say hello to everyone's on the train, and, some people are going to get off on their own stops. Other ones of us, we're going to get off together. We're going to have a large adventure. Some of us may stay together. Who knows what'll happen? Some people will go their own ways, and that's perfectly okay. That is so in alignment to even what I believe the future of relationships are being. Rather than living in a world where, everyone signs an official contract and, commits to happily forever after because they watched a few Disney commercials, or TVs actually, but yeah, commercials, that we allow people to grow at their own level of experience. And when we get to a place where the world or the relationships or the homes that we once had no longer fit us, that we're able to say, I guess it's that time. Thank you so much. And so that's what it is. So I'm by no means in a sour spot, and I'm definitely no means wanting to hold on. But I recognize that everything that I had to go through for the last year led me up to the confidence that I could essentially allow for the release of what no longer served me. Because there's that saying, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you've got. And if you love what you got, if that's how you envision your life at this moment to be, all power to you. I definitely believe follow what feels good. And if what you're doing now feels good, that's perfect. And yet, there are many people in our world who aren't happy with having to work 3 jobs and miss their families and miss their children's. There's some countries in this world where it's kind of even expected that when parents have children, that they leave their children with the grandparents and they go off to different cities to find work. And while that might suit the lifestyles of those people, for me, it was always important to be a part, to play a leading part in my son's life, not to allow some sort of other teacher to do all of the teaching. That I wanted to do the rearing myself, and I wanted to be part of those experiences. And there might be a debate of whether or not the feminine energy should have done that, or the masculine energy, meaning the man or the woman. Those old ideologies of how a man should be and how a woman should be, they're out the window by now. I hope that most people realize. I definitely realize it totally, and we'll get into that stuff maybe later. But I've recognized that balance is of the utmost importance, especially when bringing children into this world. And so, yeah, the point that I'm at right now is I'm getting ready to perhaps leave within the 7 days. And I say perhaps because I still leave it open. I still leave it out there for the possibility of people, perhaps even those people who are secretly watching me, who don't comment and perhaps are even behind my ability to see that they are actually watching. And, when I first started off this channel, I've told you before, I was able to participate in advertising with YouTube ads. And through that promo, I was able to create a channel which had almost 14,000 viewers. And when I say viewers, I mean subscribers. And by subscribers, I mean they watched the first video for like up to a minute, became a subscriber, and then never commented. They never viewed the channel again. They never came back. My channel after that, it went from 300 subscribers that I had worked diligently for, and it made it all the way up to 14,000 subscribers within a short duration of time. But those people never actually re-engaged with the channel. And yet I've come to realize that perhaps you have. Perhaps you have been watching this whole entire time and you haven't recognized that, I haven't been able to see you. I've had people tell me that their comments and notifications and even their access to my channels at many times have been limited. And even now, as I watch this video right now, I'm seeing one from Rumble and one from YouTube, a total of 2 people watching this video. And yet I know I've created videos that should have went viral. I've seen videos really quickly get 1,000 views and then instantly stopped. I've seen videos quickly escalate in views, and I don't care about the number of views. What I care about is the connection with the world abroad, because I want to get out there and I want to experience the love and the connectivity and the adventure and, the sensations of being immersed within love rather than a community that seems to be mired, seems to be, I don't know. I don't want to project on everyone. I think that everyone has their reasons for being who and what they are, and I completely respect that. I've just recognized that I'm no longer willing to, settle. I'm no longer willing to choose the lesser of 2 evils. I'm no longer willing to participate in that which doesn't fulfill the harmony and love that's in my soul. I want to get back out there and I want to meet loving men and I want to meet loving women and I want to meet people. Like there's communities out there. I've seen some in Sweden where they're building their own homes. I've seen other communities where they're in Mexico, and Greg Braden showed us some of the images where they've created communities of artists. I want to find those communities and I want to be a part of that adventure. and I want to meet the animals. I want to sleep with a giant bear, hibernate for an entire winter, or maybe even just one night, because I think that animals are a lot more friendlier than we could ever have imagined. And yeah, that's where I want to be. So, well, for the last year, I've been talking about it. I've been releasing videos. I've been doing all of this other stuff that, truly is how it feels within my heart that I'm being guided to. But yet at the same time, parts of me were holding on to the security, and I was doing things, trying to make money. I was trying to hold myself within the reality that I find myself living in, but yet I was also feeling that my heart was definitely elsewhere. And through all of that experience, I essentially recognized, the artificial portions of our reality. I could feel how people would feel, for example, or observe different telltale things, like when you're playing poker and I forgot what the word is, but when you're playing poker and tells, I could see the tells on some of the people when I was discussing things with them. The indifference, the sometimes the love and admiration as well. And yet I could also see, the distortions and distractions. There was this one amazing person that I was spending time talking to, and she, was truly in alignment with the things I was saying. And yet every time I would talk to her, a distraction would come up or something that she would be pulled away. And this wasn't a love interest. This was just an amazing person who seemed to resonate with the ideals and the idea of being a healer. That's what she was practicing to be, and that's what she is. And yet every time that there was an interaction, I could see how, events would place them with in between, and so that she would have to busy herself off and go and do something. And then one day she was no longer working at the store she worked at. And anyways, I've bared witness to these different parts. I've bared witness to cars driving by when I'm creating a podcast, and then they start honking the horn or playing music really loud. YouTube has such an issue with music being played within their podcast and things. Anyways, regardless of all that, I've seen it, and I'm deciding to move beyond it. There is a world outside there. I have once been out there, and I definitely wish to return to that. And I wish to share it. And now with this amazing program called Rumble Studio, and this is their higher version of it, where I'm able to showcase my images. And last night I showcased a few of my videos. And I want to get out there, and I want to, bring nature into the lives of everyone out there, to show everyone who is ready or willing or, holding the space for it, to share it. And perhaps we will move into a world where, we can all sit and watch the llamas eat the grass and the sheep eat the grass. Or maybe I can live in a place out in the wilderness where there are beautiful creatures like this, and learn how to speak their language, learn how to, experience and, yeah, help train animals to the degree, not to train them perhaps to be like me, but perhaps learn how to train myself to be more like them, to learn from a bird how to fly, to learn from a llama how to eat grass. In this episode that I watched this morning about Pokemon, there was the main character, his name's Ash, and he was trying to help his cat named Litten, do this new move. And now this new move was the last move that Litten needed to learn before he evolved into his next form called Torcat. And so, Ash being human, everyone kind of laughed when he would, get down on his knees and he would shake his butt around. But that's how it seemed to be, that the energy in these Pokemon were able to redistribute so that they could, essentially do these somewhat supernatural battle moves. And so Ash got on the ground with Pikachu, with his other, I think it's not Rockruff, but I can't remember what the evolution's name is. But he got down on the ground with all of his Pokemon, and he started to act like them. Because sometimes moving out of how we physically feel Sometimes just that's enough to break the ice, to break the mold. And that's one of the lessons, another one that I learned from different people is sometimes, just getting into the state and like moving around, just, being different, even just now, just getting into the moment. It allows energy to release. And that's what this whole tapping thing is. I'm kind of like, see, just doing what I did allowed energy to flow better. But it's not just getting out of your physical body, it's also getting out of the routine, the required security that we have built around ourselves, recognizing that everything is temporary. And the more that we recognize, or in my case, the more that I recognize that everything is temporary, it opens us up to the potential. And so, as I said, I'm sitting here facing the potential of being evicted because I lack the $1,800 for 2 months. Like the rent is only $900. It's very, very inexpensive. And I have done absolutely everything I was guided to do, from create the Patreon to create the channel to evolve with the channel to, I've gotten to the point where I'm creating YouTube shorts with these awesome tools that YouTube has created for me to use. I have an amazing camera and it's just a phone. I have an amazing, well, I had an amazing digital video editor called Movavi. I've since no longer been able to resubscribe because, that's what was needed perhaps to get the fire underneath my butt to get up and realize that I want to be out there. I got back to reading my Paul Seleg books and reading them aloud. I actually had the first gentleman talk to me today, and he actually observed that I was reading the book aloud while I was sitting in Starbucks. And I've read this book or this series of books aloud for over 2 years across North America, in Chicago when I was down there. So many different Starbucks and coffee shops. I've sat there and I've read this book aloud, and no one's ever asked me, why are you reading this aloud? Or like he had his own reasoning, his own thoughts. But yet, the first time today it happened. And so, therefore, I recognize that even as I change, the world around me changes. And I truly do believe that's like one of these bigger secrets that perhaps was held back. That the change that we really want to see in the world around us is the change that we first have to evolve within us. And if that requires us moving our bodies differently, whoa, or simply moving out of the spaces that we found ourselves limited, regardless if it was a relationship as I was within 3 years ago for, most happily for the 17 years prior to that, or if it's the homes that we find ourselves, waking up every day, following the same routines, going to work, doing that ride to work, yelling at that person for being slow, having that morning coffee, having that afternoon coffee, having that afternoon late coffee, doing all these things in order just to drag ourselves through the day. Well, if we find ourselves there, maybe what we all need is to realize that maybe our natural state wasn't in complacency, that it wasn't in, fortified security where what we had yesterday is what we need to have tomorrow. And maybe by the grace of God and our ability to co-create our reality and the awareness and recognition that that potentially is part of the experience, then maybe, just maybe, that's going to lead to the next greatest experience. And I definitely, definitely see that as a potential. I've had experiences like that. This podcast is already almost in an hour, so I'm going to not tell too many stories. I love telling my stories and experiences. And I truly, truly, I'm blessed by all the attention that I receive, regardless of its counter intentions, regardless of its supportive intentions or supportive energies, regardless of how this energy comes through, because I've essentially alchemized all of that energy to be what I am in this moment, and that is an adventurer ready to move forward. So if you're ready to move forward, and yes, this is a plug, this is a, an invitation, a warm invitation at that. If you're ready to perhaps move to wherever it is that you're called to move to next, maybe you want to join me on this adventure. And whether that is, subscribing or commenting or liking or sharing the video with a friend or, going out there and taking your own beautiful photographs, or even coming over to Patreon or Telegram, both of those links are in the description, and joining me on an amazing adventure. And perhaps one day we will meet out there and we'll take a whole bunch of amazing photos that, I might get called to share those as well. And even if we never meet, I truly believe that the energy that we all ripple out to our world, that we all, share with one another, the true Homo sapiens, you can see the dog's head right there. He's chilling out with me right now. Even if we never meet, we came to this point in time with this video right now, and my, complete vulnerability, but not necessarily vulnerable, because I'm no longer vulnerable to the point that perhaps I once was, because I'm standing in the light that I am. And, as I said, if you wish to come and share this experience with me, then regardless of what limitations are being imposed on you right now, regardless of what, person is around you telling you that you can't come over to support me on Patreon, that you can't, like my video because, if too many people were to like the video, then it might get a little further out there. Regardless of what role you're playing in this Truman Show I call my life, I encourage you, come, whether you're a turtle, a dog, a zebra, or, a cheetah, meaning no matter what speed you are on your own journey, come and share some quality time with any of my videos. And as I said, after this video ends, once it's fully uploaded on YouTube, at least, I'm going to put my Mother's Day celebrations, share and care those videos so that we can move this channel called New Wave Creations into, something that has never been seen before, because we are here to create a world which hasn't been seen in many generations. And it's waiting for us. It's awaiting us just beyond a veil that we're about to rip down, tear down, dissolve. When I say we, I mean all of the loving Homo sapiens from across our globe and all the organic and God-loving beings that, truly want to see this planet, Gaia, Mother Earth, restored to her divine illumination, her divine presence, and bring back God in a single form rather than, the God of separation that we know of in many religions. So thank you so much for sharing your time and attention with me. And as I said, I trust in God that whatever it is that I'm called to do, I would honestly prefer to give that $1,800 that I owe to the gracious owners of this building to remain here until the end of May. That is my desire. But yet I'm also open to whatever happens moving forward, because I'm ready and willing to receive. I no longer consent to the limitations that were imposed on me. I disavow, essentially completely disconnect from any and all former agreements, unknown or known, that I made in the past. I'm ready to, be a part of communities and people's lives who truly resonate with me and are willing to give as much as I do, that are willing to receive as much as I am willing to, so that we can share and grow from one another and become stronger together. So, welcome to Shone's Thoughts, a podcast which is going to take us everywhere and share whatever it is my heart is willing and desired and ready to share. So, I'm going to continue reading my book of love that we had just seen there. I'm going to go spend some amazing time doing something. Maybe I'll play some Pokemon against another AI that, you know, cheats or doesn't cheat, doesn't matter. And maybe I'll take some more pictures. Who knows? But I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and attention with me. I love your support. I love you. And, we'll see all of you very soon. Thank you for sharing. So much love.